I've worked at Westfield Enterprises for nearly 5 years now. Started in the mailroom, worked my way up to junior analyst. Not the fastest climb, but I was proud of what I'd accomplished on my own merits. My mother raised me alone after my father abandoned us when I was just 2 years old. I had no memories of him, just a void where a father should have been. Mr. Westfield, the CEO and founder, was a legend in the building. A self-made millionaire who built the company from nothing 30 years ago. Now it occupied the tallest building downtown, with over 3,000 employees. He rarely interacted with lower-level staff, which is why it was so strange when it happened. I was walking down the executive hallway, delivering quarterly reports, when I saw him approaching from the opposite direction. I pressed myself against the wall to give him space, eyes downcast out of respect. As he passed, he did something unexpected. "Morning, son," he said, his voice low and gruff. I looked up, startled, but he was already continuing down the hallway, his eyes never having met mine. I stood frozen, the word echoing in my head. Son. It was just a casual greeting, something older men often say to younger ones. But something in his tone felt different, personal. I shook it off and continued with my day. But that moment stayed with me. Over the next few months, I noticed Mr. Westfield appearing in places where I worked. The company cafeteria when I was eating lunch, the lobby when I was leaving. Always distant, always watching. Once, during a department presentation, he stepped in and stood at the back of the room. When my portion came up, I felt his eyes on me intensely. "You did well," he said afterward, before quickly walking away. My co-worker Jason nudged me. "Dude, Westfield never attends these meetings, and he never compliments anyone." And I didn't know what to make of it. Was he monitoring me for promotion or something else? 3 months later, I was assigned to a special project requiring access to the executive floor. I'd be working late nights, organizing historical company files for the upcoming anniversary celebration. The office manager handed me a temporary key card. "Mr. Westfield specifically requested you for this," she said, her expression curious. The executive floor was empty after 7 p.m. I sat at the reception desk outside Westfield's office, sorting through decades of company history, photos, news clippings, old contracts. It was fascinating seeing how the company had evolved. On my third night, I dropped a stack of folders, scattering papers across the floor. As I gathered them up, I noticed the reception desk's bottom drawer was slightly ajar. I pushed it closed, but it bounced back open. Something was stuck. I pulled the drawer open wider to fix the obstruction. Inside was a small wooden box, elegantly carved with the initials J.W., James Westfield. I knew I shouldn't look, but curiosity overwhelmed me. I carefully lifted the lid. Inside were personal items, a wedding band, a hospital bracelet, and photographs. One photo in particular caught my attention. A young man, maybe 20 years old, standing beside a beautiful woman. They were smiling, arms around each other. The woman was holding a baby. I recognized the woman instantly. It was my mother, 30 years younger, but unmistakably her. My hands began trembling as I looked closer at the young man. The resemblance was uncanny, the same jawline I saw in my mirror every morning. The same eyes, the same distinctive dimple on the right cheek when he smiled. The baby in the photo was me. My mind raced through calculations. The timing aligned perfectly with my birth, the abandonment my mother had always described. But why would James Westfield have this photo? Unless the realization hit me like a physical blow. I dropped back into the chair, the photo clutched in my hand. James Westfield wasn't just my boss. He was my father. The man who had built this empire, who commanded respect throughout the industry, who had passed me in hallways for years without acknowledgement, except for that one strange moment. Son. The word took on an entirely new meaning now. I heard the elevator doors opening down the hall. Quickly, I returned the photo to the box and the box to the drawer, my heart pounding. Footsteps approached, deliberate and heavy. I tried to look busy with the files. James Westfield rounded the corner, stopping abruptly when he saw me. "Working late?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes, sir, the anniversary project." He nodded, eyes darting to the drawer and back to me. "Finding everything you need?" There was tension in his question. He knew. He knew that I might have seen. That I might have discovered the truth he'd kept hidden for 28 years. "Almost," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "There are still some pieces missing." Our eyes locked, and for the first time, I truly saw myself in him. The same intensity, the same guarded expression. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "pieces get lost for a reason." I couldn't sleep that night. Questions tormented me until dawn. Why had he abandoned us? Why work in his company for 5 years without saying anything? Why the secrecy even now? The next morning, I called my mother. We spoke regularly, but I'd never mentioned the strange behavior of my CEO. Now, I carefully approached the subject. "Mum, do you remember much about my father?" Silence filled the line. Finally, she sighed. "Why are you asking about him now, after all these years?" "I'm just curious. You never talk about him." "There's nothing to say. He was a young man with big dreams. When I got pregnant, he wasn't ready for a family. He chose his ambitions over us." "What was his name?" I asked, heart pounding. Another long pause. "James," she finally said. "James Wilson. Not Westfield. Wilson. Close but different." My certainty wavered. "What did he do for work?" "He was starting some kind of business, always talking about building something important. I didn't pay much attention. It seemed like just talk back then." I thanked her and ended the call, more confused than ever. That night I returned to the executive floor with new purpose. I needed more information. This time I waited until nearly midnight before opening that drawer again. I examined every photo carefully. Behind the picture of my mother, written in faded ink, was a date and 2 names. Sarah and James, June 1997. I continued searching through company archives. Eventually, I found what I was looking for. Articles about Westfield from the company's early days. One mentioned that he had changed his name from Wilson to Westfield when launching the company, taking his grandmother's maiden name for a fresh start. The pieces were falling into place. As I was replacing the files, the light suddenly flicked on. I jumped, caught red-handed. "I wondered how long it would take you," James Westfield said from the doorway. He didn't look angry, just tired, resigned. "How long what would take me?" I asked, playing dumb despite the evidence spread before me. He walked forward slowly, picked up the photo I'd been examining. "To figure it out. You've always been smart, like your mother." The confirmation stole my breath. For a moment we stood in silence, 28 years of absence hanging between us. "Why?" The word came out raw, loaded with a lifetime of questions. He gestured to a chair. "Sit, please." He sat across from me, running a hand through his silver hair, hair that had once been the same shade of brown as mine. "I was 21 when I met your mother. She was beautiful, brilliant. I fell hard." His voice was soft with memory. "When she got pregnant, I was terrified. I had nothing to offer a family, no money, no prospects, just big dreams and student loans. So you left." The bitterness I'd carried unknowingly for years surfaced. I told her I needed time. 6 months to get my business off the ground. She didn't believe me, thought I was making excuses. We fought. He looked down at his hands. "I said things I regret. She told me not to come back until I could be a real father. And you never came back." My voice was flat. I tried. After a year, when things started working, I went to your old apartment. You were both gone, no forwarding address. You could have found us if you really wanted to. He nodded slowly. You're right. I convinced myself you were better off, that Sarah deserved someone more stable, more reliable. The business consumed me. Years passed. The longer I waited, the harder it seemed to reach out. Until I applied for a job here, I said, the realization dawning. You recognized my name. Your resume came across my desk, same name as your mother's. Your birth date matched. Your photo. He shook his head. I knew immediately. You hired me but never said anything. For 5 years, I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become without my influence. I was proud, so proud of who you are. His voice broke slightly. But I had no right to disrupt your life after being absent for so long. So why say anything now? Why son in the hallway that day? He looked embarrassed. A moment of weakness. Seeing you there, The words slipped out. I regretted it immediately. I sat back, overwhelmed. All this time, working here, you watching me, never saying anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said quietly, or to suddenly be your father. That ship sailed decades ago, but you deserve to know the truth. The silence stretched between us, heavy with lost years and missed opportunities. What happens now? I finally asked. That's entirely up to you, he replied. If you want to walk away, I understand. If you have questions, I'll answer them. If you want time to process this, take all the time you need. I stood up, needing space to think. I don't know what I want yet. He nodded, acceptance in his eyes. Whatever you decide, your position here is secure. This doesn't change your professional standing. You've earned everything you've achieved. As I turned to leave, he spoke again. There's one more thing you should know. He opened his desk drawer and removed an envelope. On your first day here, I set up a trust in your name. I've been adding to it monthly since then. It won't make up for 23 years of absence, but he held out the envelope. Inside was documentation for a trust worth over $2 million. I don't want your money, I said, pushing it back toward him. It's not about the money, he replied. It's about acknowledging that I failed you, that I should have been there. I left the envelope on his desk and walked out, my mind spinning with revelations. The father I'd never known had been watching me for years, too cowardly to speak the truth, yet proud enough to track my progress. The contradiction was impossible to reconcile. For 3 days, I didn't go to work. I talked with my mother, who confirmed most of what James had told me. She had moved us without telling him, hurt and convinced he'd never return. Neither of them had handled it well. Both had been young, stubborn, proud, and I had paid the price. On the 4th day, I returned to Westfield Enterprises. Without an appointment, I walked straight to the executive floor. His assistant tried to stop me, but I pushed past her. James Westfield was at his desk, on a call. He looked up, surprised. "I'll call you back," he said to whoever was on the line, and hung up. I closed the door behind me and took a deep breath. "I'm not here for a father," I said firmly. "It's too late for that." He nodded, pain visible in his eyes. "But," I continued, "I am here to say this. I'm proud of what I've accomplished on my own merits, and I'm going to continue building my career, here or elsewhere, based on what I can do, not who my father is." "That's fair," he said quietly. "You owe me 28 years of truth," I continued. "Not money, not special treatment, just honesty from now on." He stood and extended his hand. "Honesty, you have my word." I hesitated, then shook his hand. Not the embrace of father and son, but the beginning of something new, something honest. "One more thing," I said, releasing his hand. "That trust fund?" "Yes?" Donate it, all of it, to single-parent family support organizations. For the first time, I saw genuine surprise on his face, followed by something else. Respect. You really are your mother's son, he said with the hint of a smile. I'm my own person, I corrected him, shaped by her strength, your absence, and my own choices. He nodded, understanding. So what now? Now, I said, we start over. Not as father and son, but as two men who share more than just a workplace. The rest we'll figure out one day at a time. In the weeks that followed, James and I established a tentative relationship. We began meeting for coffee on Thursday mornings before the office filled, always in the company cafeteria, always professional enough that casual observers wouldn't think anything of it. But in those early morning conversations, barriers slowly lowered. I learned about his childhood in rural Pennsylvania, raised by a single mother himself, how he'd worked 3 jobs to put himself through college. The failed startup attempts before Westfield Enterprises finally took off. The loneliness of success without family to share it with. He never remarried or had other children. The company became my life, he admitted during our 3rd meeting. I told myself it was enough. I shared selective pieces of my own history. My school years without a father figure, the odd jobs I'd worked to help Mom make ends meet, the scholarship that put me through college. I kept many things private. He hadn't earned full access to my life story yet. What I didn't tell James was that I'd been meeting with my mother too. After the initial shock, she'd insisted on hearing everything. 28 years of anger had softened into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to acknowledge the past, honestly. I was so hurt when he left, she confessed during one of our conversations. I convinced myself he never truly cared about either of us. It was easier that way. Did you love him? I asked. She smiled sadly. Very much. That's why it hurt so badly when he chose his ambitions over us. He says he came back after a year. Her eyes widened slightly. We had moved by then. My sister helped us relocate to Chicago. Would you have given him another chance if he'd found you? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know. I was so angry back then. But watching you grow up without a father, sometimes I wondered if my pride cost you something important. The following Thursday, I arrived at the cafeteria to find James already there, 2 coffees waiting. He looked unusually nervous. I've been thinking, he said after we exchanged greetings. The company's 30th anniversary gala is next month. Would you consider attending, not just as an employee? The implication was clear. He wanted to acknowledge our connection publicly. That's a big step, I replied carefully. Are you sure you're ready for the questions it would raise? I'm not concerned about myself, he said. My reputation can handle it, but it would affect you too. Office gossip, assumptions about favoritism. I won't put you in that position unless you're comfortable with it. I appreciated his consideration, but needed time to think. Let me get back to you. That evening, I called my mother. He wants to go public, I told her, at the company gala. How do you feel about that? She asked. Conflicted. Part of me thinks he doesn't deserve the public redemption. Another part feels like hiding it is, I don't know, giving the secret too much power. This isn't about what he deserves, she said gently. It's about what you want, what feels right for your life now. Hadeen! I thought about it for days. The truth was, hiding our connection had begun to feel exhausting. Colleagues had started noticing our Thursday meetings, raising eyebrows when James stopped by my department. Secrecy was creating exactly the kind of rumors going public might generate. The following Thursday, I arrived early. Yes, I told James when he sat down. I'll attend the gala with you, but on one condition. Name it, he said, relief evident in his voice. Mom comes too. He froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Sarah, you want to invite Sarah? This story involves all three of us. If we're going public, let's be completely honest about it. He set his cup down carefully. Have you discussed this with her? Yes, she's willing if you are. He looked genuinely frightened for the first time since I'd known him. James Westfield, who commanded boardrooms and managed billion-dollar deals, was terrified of facing the woman he'd abandoned nearly 3 decades ago. I haven't seen her since, he trailed off. Since before I was born, I finished for him. He nodded slowly. Does she hate me? She's moved past hate a long time ago, I answered honestly. Now it's more like indifference with occasional flashes of curiosity. He winced at indifference, but seemed to accept it as fair. If Sarah's willing to come, I'd be honored to have her there, he finally said. As the gala approached, company buzz intensified. The event would be held at the Grand Wellington Hotel with over 500 guests, including employees, clients, and city officials. Everyone speculated about the major announcement James was rumored to be making. 3 days before the gala, an envelope arrived at my apartment containing a custom-tailored tuxedo with a note. No pressure, just thought you might want something special for the evening. JW. I called him immediately. I appreciate the gesture, but I need to be clear about something. What's that? He sounded concerned. I'm not for sale. Not with trust funds, not with tuxedos, not with future promotions or corner offices. If we're going to have any kind of relationship, it has to be built on something real, not purchased. There was a long silence. I never meant to imply, I know, I cut him off, but boundaries matter here. I'll wear the tux because it's appropriate for the event. But going forward, no more gifts, no special treatment at work. We build this, whatever this is, on even ground or not at all. Understood, he said quietly. And thank you for your honesty. The night of the gala arrived. I picked up my mother in a company-provided car. She looked beautiful in a midnight blue gown, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. You okay? I asked as we pulled away from her building. Just nervous, she admitted. I never imagined I'd be facing James again, let alone at some fancy corporate event. We can still back out, I offered. She straightened her shoulders. No, you were right. It's time to stop letting secrets control our lives. I'm ready. The Grand Wellington's ballroom was transformed for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegantly decorated tables. A string quartet played softly in one corner. Company achievements were projected onto screens around the room. James was waiting for us in the private reception area. When my mother walked in, he visibly paled. For several seconds, they simply stared at each other across the room. Two people who had once been young and in love, now meeting as strangers after a lifetime apart. Sarah, he finally said, his voice barely audible, you look wonderful. James, she acknowledged with a small nod. Congratulations on 30 successful years. The awkwardness was palpable. I stepped in. Shall we head inside? I think they're about to start seating guests. We were placed at the head table, which raised eyebrows throughout the room. The president of operations, who normally sat at James's right hand, had been moved to an adjacent table. Instead, my mother and I flanked the CEO, a clear statement that something significant was happening. Throughout dinner, James was uncharacteristically quiet. He picked at his food while fielding congratulations from guests who stopped by the table. My mother maintained polite composure, though I could feel her tension. As dessert was served, James excused himself to prepare for his speech. My mother leaned toward me. Are you sure about this? She whispered. Once he makes this announcement, your life at the company will change forever. I know, I said, but I'm tired of secrets. The lights dimmed and James took the stage. He began with the expected remarks, thanking employees, highlighting company milestones, announcing a substantial employee bonus in honor of the anniversary. Then his tone shifted. "For 30 years, I've built this company with single-minded determination," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "I've often said Westfield Enterprises is my greatest achievement, my legacy. But success has a cost, and sometimes that cost is too high." The room had gone completely silent. 28 years ago, I made a decision that I've regretted every day since. I chose ambition over family. I walked away from responsibilities that mattered more than any business ever could. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I needed to build something substantial before I could be the man my family deserved. He paused, emotion visible on his face. By the time I tried to return, they were gone. And through my own cowardice and pride, I failed to find them. I threw myself into building this company instead, telling myself it was enough. It wasn't. Murmurs spread through the audience. James looked directly at our table. 5 years ago, through what I can only call fate, my son applied for a position here. Not knowing who I was, I recognized him immediately, but didn't have the courage to tell him the truth. For 5 years, I watched him excel through his own merit, rising through the company on hard work and talent alone. Heads turned in my direction. I kept my eyes forward, my expression neutral. 3 weeks ago, he discovered the truth. And rather than the anger he had every right to feel, he has shown me grace I don't deserve and wisdom beyond his years. James gestured toward me. "I'd like to introduce my son, properly, for the first time. Not as my heir or successor. He's made it abundantly clear he wants to make his own way. But simply as someone I'm incredibly proud to know." The spotlight found me. I stood slowly, acknowledging the stunned faces turned in my direction with a small nod. "And I'd also like to honor the woman who raised him to be the man he is today," James continued, voice thick with emotion. "Who did the job I should have shared. Sarah Collins, thank you." Another spotlight illuminated my mother, who rose with quiet dignity beside me. The room erupted in applause, confused but enthusiastic. After the speech, a constant stream of colleagues approached with questions thinly disguised as congratulations. I answered patiently, emphasizing that my professional standing remained unchanged. I wasn't becoming an executive overnight. I wasn't James's heir apparent. I was still the same analyst they'd worked with all along. Near midnight, I found James alone on the hotel's terrace, staring out at the city lights. "That was quite an announcement," I said, joining him at the railing. "Too much?" he asked. "Honest," I replied. "That's what matters." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "I spoke with your mother," he said eventually. "We're going to have coffee next week, just to talk." "That's good," I said, genuinely pleased. "I'm not trying to rekindle anything," he clarified quickly. "Too much time has passed. But there are things that need to be said. Apologies that are long overdue." I nodded. "Honesty looks good on you, James." He smiled slightly. "It feels strange, but good." The following Monday, I returned to work braced for awkwardness. There were stares, whispers, and too many casual drop-bys at my desk. But by Wednesday, the novelty had begun to fade. I maintained my regular routine, declined special treatment, and continued proving myself through my work. In my Thursday meeting with James, now held openly in the company cafe, he slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "The charitable foundation is established. As you requested, the full amount of the trust has been donated to organizations supporting single-parent families." He hesitated. "I added a matching amount from my personal funds. It seemed right." I reviewed the documentation. 5 organizations would receive substantial ongoing support. scholarships for children of single parents, housing assistance, career development programs. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded. "Your mother and I had coffee yesterday. How did it go?" "Difficult. Necessary." He looked down at his cup. "She told me about your childhood, the struggles you both faced, the birthdays I missed." "That's in the past," I said. "But it shaped who you are today," he replied. "Who you both are. I want to understand that, even if I can never make up for it." As I left the meeting, my phone chimed with a text from my mother. "Lunch Saturday? I have news." Over weekend lunch, she surprised me. "I have accepted a consulting position with Westfield's new foundation," she announced. "They need someone who understands the challenges single parents face. Who better than me?" "Are you sure that's a good idea? Working with James?" She smiled. "It's not about James. It's about helping families who are struggling like we did, using our experience to make a difference." She reached for my hand. "Besides, it's time I made peace with the past, too." 6 months later, things had settled into a new normal. James and I maintained our Thursday coffee meetings. I received a well-earned promotion based on my work performance. My mother's consulting role expanded into a full directorship of the foundation. We weren't a conventional family. Too much time and too many wounds prevented that. But we had found something unexpected: honesty, respect, and the beginnings of healing. The word son no longer echoed painfully in my mind. Now it was just a word, complicated, imperfect, but spoken in the open without shame or secrecy, and that, I discovered, made all the difference.